Hi and welcome. Today, I would like to present you in the SUSE QE Tools Workshop how we deploy openQA OpenSUSE.org continuously. I'll share my screen first with something in the browser and then later in the terminal. So we deploy openQA OpenSUSE.org, that is the openQA software and all packages that we have there on an OpenSUSE Leap system. And since some months, we do that continuously. Whenever there's any change coming in, like pull request in the according repositories, then we deploy these changes. This is also available to you as users of openQA. So what we use is also part of the documentation. There's a section automatic system upgrades and reboots of openQA hosts. There are two convenience packages that we provide for OpenSUSE, and they use scripts which we have in the openQA project. One is called openQA Auto Update, which does automatic daily, by default it does daily system upgrades and reboots whenever necessary, or rather nightly. That is using systemd timers as a schedule, and then calling mostly zipper to update packages, but some checks up front, and then informing reboot manager to conduct a reboot whenever the according configured maintenance window is. That would be like nightly 3 a.m. in the early morning, or maybe weekly on a Sunday or some other time. And then there's a second package, which is openQA continuous update. And that one can be used in combination to continuously upgrade the system. We say upgrade the system. I mean, our main focus here is on the software that we provide, that is both Audience and openQA. But for consistency, what we actually do is we just upgrade the complete system, because commonly when we're talking about one system, then this is tailored for that one purpose of openQA. So there are not other unrelated services, at least those hosts. What that does, it checks whether our development projects that we have in OBS contains updates, and if it does, it upgrades the whole system. It's stated here that the approach is independent but can be used complementary, and the configuration is analogous to both. So let me show you shortly how these scripts look like, because I think they are rather easy to understand for such a technical audience as I trust that you are. So we have in scripts, we have the multiple scripts. Most of them start with openQA prefix. And let's first look into openQA auto update and see it's a rather limited shell script. What it does, it loads openQA check devil repo. So I will also show that later on, but the name already gives the promise that what we do is we check if packages in the according development repository are considered stable. And then basically we call zipper-dub. And afterwards, when we need a reboot, if zipper says that, well, there are packages replaced that need a reboot, like a new kernel, then we tell reboot manager control to schedule a reboot, normally not immediately conduct one, but schedule one. If reboot manager control doesn't exist, well, then we skip that. So we assume that the user wants to do it on their own. The second one, what we have there is the openQA continuous update. And what OpenQA continuous update does, it looks pretty similar. And what it does, it's calling zipper ref to refresh, which is more important here because what we are talking about is like changes in the scopes of minutes. So, you know, to provide a consistent state, we need to ensure that we update that particular repository. Because otherwise, you know, by default, I think zipper has this 10-minute timeout. It wouldn't check for new metadata within that time frame. And by that, we're doing it explicitly. Then we also call OpenQA check devel repo, like are the packages fine? Like, you know, maybe the package is there, but some other dependency wasn't rebuilt, and then maybe there isn't full consistency. Called zipper ref again, and then basically we just do the same as we did for auto update, which is call zipper dub. Now the third component that I can show is OpenQA check devel repo. We take a look in here, and you see this is also shell script. There's just a bit of boilerplate on top to provide a help. And then what we do is with curl, we check the OBS API or the state of the project for the architecture and the operating system version that we're interested in. And then if the all the packages are in a published state and we don't have any broken, then we say it looks good, and then we can continue. Now the question was, what's the host OS version for 0.3? So what we have is the current stable Leap version. So we just updated 0.3 from OpenSUSE Leap 15.3 to 15.4 in the past days. And yesterday we also updated OpenSUSE Leap 15.4 plus packages from Devil OpenQA OBS Pro. Janis?
Yeah, sorry for my ignorance, but on W you do always dub, but on Leap you should is recommended to use the app update, not dub.
Okay, so what the difference is that when we call dub, we allow zipper to try to resolve dependencies and allow downgrades and allow install of new packages across all the configured repositories. So this is why, to be consistent, zipper dub is actually the correct approach here, because it might be that we need to change a dependency from the main Leap repository to Devil OpenQA, or it might be necessary to bring in a new dependency which isn't in Leap yet, so we put that into Devil OpenQA itself. And with assuming that one has correctly configured repositories, I would argue that zipper dub is the better, safer, and the correct approach as soon as you work with more than just the vanilla Leap repository. And in this context, we do. So that's also explained here. In the OpenQA repositories, we suggest priorities. Okay, and if you have priorities configured like that, then zipper dub should do the right thing, which in this case shows that, for example, this additional repository, which doesn't apply to Tumbleweed, we only have it on Leap. This additional repository is always preferred even over the main Devil OpenQA repository. Why? Because we use this additional repository only for new versions of dependencies or new dependencies that are not provided within the main repository of Leap. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks. That's interesting. Yeah.
Okay, so let's shortly show the situation on the build project. So we have devel openQA. And what you see here is that, well, mainly what we have there is the openQA project and the OS auto input. What else is there? You can see, for example, we have like development containers that we built there, and we have some other containers like OpenQA container WebUI, WebUI load balancer, worker, and these ISO2 video containers. So most of them are containers that we built there. How does that look like then in results? Let me show you. You can see here that's really simple. It's a Docker file that we check out from Git, and then we build for a single repository, which is the Tumbleweed base container repository. Build that container. And it looks like the same for the others. Now, for what versions do we build openQA or OS autoinst? Now you can see that as of now, because we are in the transition phase, we build OS autoinst for Leap 15.4, which is the current latest stable Leap version. We also built it for Sleep 15 SP3, factory ARM PowerPC Leap 15.3, Leap 15.4 again, but with a different name. This is also like to provide a migration path for users that were using repository with that name prefix, and Tumbleweed. Now, how will it look like then when Leap 15.3 goes out of support, or when we can't maintain it anymore and assume that enough users are on the newer version? Is that we wouldn't need this repository anymore. We wouldn't need this repository anymore, because after the jump project, 15.4 are the very same binary packages that could be used on Leap as well as Leap. And eventually we would also remove this repository and just keep the only the numbered repository for 15.4, and of course we will keep. As you can see here, there are multiple packages blocked. So right now we would actually, if you remember that check devel repo function, it should tell us that, hold on, don't install new packages, because not all packages are in a consistent state, and we would wait for that to settle down. Any questions about the build project setup on the main level or the check devel repo script? Yeah, Phoenix.
One very naive question: why is O3 not running on Tumbleweed?
I would say, well, mostly for historic reasons, because it was always running on OpenSUSE, which turned into Leap, and at that point in time, Tumbleweed was like created as a new project, and for servers, no one said like, hey, switch from stable OpenSUSE to Tumbleweed. But the reason why we keep it that way is because I would say, well, we do still consider SLE as well as Leap as a good and stable base for a server system. And plus, to be honest, plus we as the SUSE QE Tool team that we maintain the servers, by now that's more and more the reason why we do that is because we want to run and test implicitly by running services on that, to test for our users and our customers. Yeah. So what does that mean for support of openQA and OS autoinst on Tumbleweed? I would say that's also completely supported. Yeah, it's true. I mean, the real impact of scalability and performance, we really only have that performance statistics from the Leap base, because this is what we run openQA OpenSUSE.org and openQA SUSE.de on. But it's very unlikely that Tumbleweed would have a problem there. And we build the packages and we run the tests on Tumbleweed, and I would say within CI tests we test more on Tumbleweed, but then the only small delta we fill by running the production server only.
Okay, thank you.
I guess the argument should be clear. I mean, this was always the case, like that for development purposes, Tumbleweed is easier, because if we need a new dependency, we just say like, oh, okay, cool, let's submit that package to OpenSUSE Factory, which will be included in Tumbleweed in the next snapshot when everything is passing, and then from then on we can just rely on that dependency to be there. So the only thing that we really need for Tumbleweed is this main project to build new versions of OSORDinst. And for you as a user, do you even need this repository to run OSORDinst and openQA? And I would say no, you don't, because openQA and OSORDinst is also in Factory. So, if we go to software.opensuse.org and say, tell me about openQA, then it will tell you that there is openQA as an official release in Tumbleweed, and you can see from the version number that's 4.61658. And if we look, the development version would be 4.61658. So it only is differing in the sixth digit. So we keep that very up to date. We can also check. So yeah, there's an automatic request every second day whenever tests are stable. The last one was from 22 hours ago. So the new version, which is in Tumbleweed, in stable Tumbleweed, is younger than last 24-hour period. So yeah, that's completely enough. Now, going back to Leap. So as I explained, there was the second repository that we need, which is what we have here. So we have devel openqA Leap 15.4. Now, what are all these packages? And you can see that these packages are either dependencies that are not included in base Leap, or they are included, but maybe they don't provide the version that we want to run. So, for example, for Perl Modulicious, what we have here, these are all linked packages from Factory. You can see that we want to run the same version from Factory because we are not patient enough to wait for the new version to have in Leap. We want to run version 9.26, which is the current version in Tumbleweed. If we would take a look on, so what's the version that we currently have in Leap, then at the time of release of Leap 15.4, it was version 9.22. So not that bad, but making our life a bit easier. All right, so now let me try to share terminal window. This work for you?
A bit bigger, yes.
This, okay. So I'm logging into O3, aka Arial. So that's openQA openSUSE.org. And what we can see there is, let's first ask systemd, is the system running? Yeah, it's running, meaning there's nothing failing. And now what we can do is we can take a look at dimension services, which is the openQA continuous update service first. So here we see the service, and we can see that it says it was running at that was like 4 minutes ago in UTC, 4 minutes 38 seconds ago, it was running. And what you can see here is the incomplete output from querying on OBS. So let's take a look in the journal, and then we should be able to see the complete page. So for example, you see here, started June 30, started continuous deploy, and it's checking all the repositories, and then it says we are already up to date, there was nothing to do. The next cycle, that's 5 minutes later, it starts again, and it says, yeah, it's looking like dirty. It says looks bad. Maybe you should change the wording because it's not like bad. It's like building at that time. And then we are waiting. We could see that there are no relevant changes, and then we go on. And then most of the time, of course, we would assume that there isn't a lot of things to do. It's not like we build a new package every 5 minutes 24/7, but eventually I don't know what term I should search for. Maybe new version. Nope. Okay. Let's go to the end. So that's from today. This is the second thing which I wanted to show you. Is here we can see that it's looking into the repository, and you can see, for example, here that openQA is blocked. So, you know, it waits for certain dependencies to be completed, to be built. Keep in mind that currently there's also a reduced capacity in OBS workers due to the hot summer. So the effect we can see here, because we are waiting for the packages to be built eventually. Now you have to believe me that this actually does do some update. What we could take a look for is in zipper log. When was the last? Okay, this is 2015. Actually, I wanted to look into something like this. So we know at this time there was a new openQA package installed. Cool. So let's see. Can ask journal CTL. Could you show me journal from here? And there we go. So we see that at 4:24 it starts continuous update. It doesn't do anything, and then 5 minutes later it's triggered again. So every couple of minutes. Then we see like, okay, the devel openQA repository looks good, meaning that all packages are built, they succeeded, and they are in a published state, meaning that then we continue. It could still be that at this point there is no real upgrade, and but what we see is that zipper tells us the following packages are going to be upgraded, which includes openQA, but also you can see also other packages. So, you know, we don't mind that we also pull in other updates at that time. In most cases, these are maintenance updates, so we assume that it doesn't really have an impact on the behavior. But here, of course, for openQA, we expect that this is a proper bug fix or a new feature or anything like that. And we see zipper retrieving the packages, installing the packages, and yeah, it even includes like rebuild of init RAMFS, and then 1 minute later we have the new package installed. What does it mean that the package is installed? Well, we can take a look into the openQA Web UI service. And sorry, I'm getting casing wrong. And what we can see is that the web UI is also restarted. So we stop the web UI and we start, and it takes 3 seconds for the web UI to be available again, and that's the new version. Okay, and some hours later, we do the same thing again. So even over, honestly, I don't know what this boot means. I think it's an identifier for the current boot cycle. But we see that we do the same thing again. We start the web UI. Some seconds later, we are running the new version. So continuously deployed. Alice?
Yeah, the script does a reboot right after the update.
Right, so about the reboot, that's not happening in continuous update because, you know, a reboot would take a little bit longer than just 3 seconds. It's a VM, so it takes about, let's say, 20 seconds to reboot. So most people and most workers and most openQA jobs would also not be interrupted when we actually reboot O3, but we handle that in openQA Opto update. And you can see that here the timestamp is in the night, and only in the night we do that. And then it says, let me see, can we? We see that in here. So we have, yeah, no, I mean, since when is this system up? So this one is up since 21 hours. And that was actually the out of the usual upgrade distribution upgrade to Leap 15.4, but a normal reboot would only be actually we can check. So we have, you know, reboot manager control, and we can ask it for the status, and it says status reboot not requested. Okay, so why is that? Well, because there is this tool needs restarting, which is working together with Zipper, and it could give us a reboot hint, and it says no core libraries or service have been updated since the last system boot. Reboot is probably not necessary. You know, what we did is we only updated OS Audinst or openQA since then, and there's no reboot because we got just restart the service on top. Right?
Okay. But I was just wondering, when it reboots, the jobs are interrupted or?
When O3, when the web UI reboots, then normally
No.
jobs are not interrupted because the jobs are running on the workers, and the workers are, you know, trying to contact the web UI to upload the details, upload new status and screenshots. And for sure, during a time, and this could even be like 5 minutes reboot or something, when there's, you know, file system check, or maybe you're running on bare metal and you need lengthy firmware reinitialization. That's okay because jobs still retry to upload the data, so normally those are not interrupted by a reboot of the web UI. But we mentioned already, what about the workers? You know, we were talking about openQA packages. And of course, the packages, and especially OS Audinst, are the same that we use on the workers. So let's go to one worker. Let's just go to the first one, which is openQA worker 1. And now, how is an update done on the openQA worker 1? Well, it's boring because it's just in the same way. So we have openQA continuous update running as a service, and it's doing the very same thing. You see, this started continuous deployed openQA. Then we look into the devel openQA repository. then we see that there's an upgrade pending, in this case for all sort of discrete tabs, so not even the backend or OpenQA. We install the package and we are good. And in this case, it doesn't even restart any services. Now, what would happen if we trigger an upgrade of OS order inst or an openQA worker package? Well, for that, what we have is, I can't get it right. So for that, we have all the workers running as the so-called openQA worker auto restart. Okay, so if I'm taking a look into openQA worker 5, then I can see that this one is actually not running here because that one is mapped to openQA worker plain, and we're not running the plain worker, but a slight variant, which is the auto restart worker. And what that one is doing is saying like, well, as soon as the job finishes, then I will restart myself. And then it would automatically pick up a new OS order inst, a new openQA worker package, as well as any new configuration. So, if you change the worker configuration, we give the old job a chance to finish, and only on restart load the new effective configuration. But what about the reboot then, you ask? Well, if we actually reboot the worker, so if we check right now, then you see that it's actually, it doesn't seem like it's running actually any openQA jobs right now. It's only running the workers, which is fine. If we would have jobs running, then they would be interrupted, because if you reboot the machine, then any VM running on it would be terminated. But that's normally also not a problem if you don't do that too often, because all these jobs are then automatically re-triggered on OpenQA. You may have seen that when it says incomplete, then the worker has abandoned this job, and then it's automatically re-triggered. So in many cases, people don't even see that. And so since when is this machine up? Yeah, you also see that this has been running for less than a day, because, we run updates, we run upgrades, and so on. So, further questions? No? Okay. One more topic which I would like to share then is, if we continuously deploy new versions, don't we, break stuff much more often, right? Because, we just develop something, nobody ever tested that, and then we merge a pull request, and then it's then it will be automatically deployed. It will impact production runs. Yes, we do want to have that feedback from production, but does it break stuff? Well, no, because when we merge pull requests, we are already pretty confident. So let's take a look for a rather simple pull request, which I created yesterday. So what this thing is doing is just like changing 1 to 2 lines. It only has an impact on the web UI. So maybe the worker isn't affected, but what do we do to ensure that, this doesn't break anything horribly? Well, we see that there is there's approval by at least 2 persons, and there are additional checks. Yeah, you can see all these different checks, including web UI Docker Compose, where we start a web UI worker structure. We run all these different tests for the API, a full stack test, heavy tests where we test scalability. And on top, and this is why in that special circumstances I merged manually on top, it's running tests in OBS before we even accept that package into Devel OpenQA. After we accept the merge, the pull request, we will have a new package in Devel OpenQA. Devel OpenQA, we additionally, or we again run tests because, you know, the system might behave slightly different depending on the version. So if we want to take a look, for example, here into the latest Tumbleweed build, then we see that so this is the building. Yeah, here we see the test summary report. So we ran 3,943 tests in 700 seconds. So more than 10 minutes. We also run tests during the package build process. And only then we accept the package. Okay. As soon as this is built in the next cycle, so a couple of minutes, then it's deployed automatically. If there's anything breaking in production, which we couldn't have covered by automatic tests, well, it's unusual, it's unexpected, but it's an opportunity to learn something, because that means that we are missing something in the automatic test. And we want to learn how to make that better. Janis?
Yeah, okay. Maybe a little bit different discussion, and I think we have discussed it before. I think maybe Felix had this idea. Why you don't use? At least I would like to see something like with Ansible, so you can have organize all these processes. You can run status or deploy from your local machine. You could have also see what fails more easy, maybe.
Yeah.
What would you think?
Well, we have salt states. So what I presented you here in particular was about OpenQA, OpenSUSE org. Our idea was, or my approach so far was to say, well, we use Salt to deploy OpenQA SUSE. I think I presented that in a workshop already. Let me shortly show you. Maybe you guys remember the visual impression. So we have this OSD deployment project, and what it does is every night also runs a pipeline, and yeah, it fails now because of a problem in the GitLab CI runners, but the last time it worked completely fine was 3 days ago. It looks like this. Basically, what we are doing is pretty similar. We do some checks, like we check the state of packages, but we additionally check that OpenQA OpenSUSE org is up before we deploy OSD. So, you know, it's a layered approach. So we have this O3 you can see as the canary deployment for OSD. And then basically we do the same. We you know, when it says download new packages, this is basically just zipper download only, and then deploy to production means like call zipper, but over Salt. Okay. And then apply the high states to manage the configuration. So why don't we use Salt for O3? Well, we could. The configuration there's difference. The Salt pillars were tailored for OSD, so nobody adapted it for O3 in that way. But on the other hand, what we try to do is use on purpose a different setup on OpenQA OpenSUSE org, because I also prefer to have as much as possible covered within the packages themselves, so that nobody needs to configure everything heavily with another configuration management tool when the package already provides everything that's needed. So short teaser. I'd like to show you the definitions in the OpenQA package, you can call OpenQA, zipper in OpenQA, and it does install OpenQA. But if you just want to have like a single person, single machine instance, what you can do is there is a convenience package which is called OpenQA LocalDB. So if you just call zipper in OpenQA LocalDB, sorry, I meant single instance, because that one is using LocalDB and it's doing even more. When you use that, then it's setting up all the services that you need. So, by default, you just go to the machine and it's there. You don't need to configure a lot or anything on top. Janis, does that make sense to you?
No, I'm not sure. Can I run Salt from my workstation for check, for example, status or restart worker? Or I don't think so, right?
Well, Salt starts if you just configure Salt master and a Salt minion. What you can use Salt for is to get a lot from the system already without any configuration or Salt states or anything. It's like a remote execution framework. It does provide a lot of convenient functions. So, of course, you can check services with Salt even without having any Salt states repository. Can you install openQA using Salt? I would say the easiest is really to just call Salt, but install the openQA package. You don't need more. Do you want to replicate complete openQA SUSE QE environment? Well, then I suggest to use Salt states openQA. And do you want to, deploy a structure of multiple machines with different roles, like you have one or multiple web UI, one or multiple workers. Maybe you don't have OpenQA worker 3, that's fine, but maybe you have an AH64 worker as well, and a monitor host and a storage host. Then, yeah, these Salt states provide a lot because, they configure the individual machines for their particular purpose in a bigger cluster. Okay.
Yeah, okay. I will try to give you my, like, if I want to do, like, you have different scripts to put in different machines on the worker, and to you have to go through all of them to check and restart an update, but you don't have one common place. If I want to add, for example, some worker for ARM, with I imagine with Ansible I can say run configure, I don't know, something ARM, and give me some worker
Yeah,
immediately,
that's
right? But
mhm.
from one place, from one remotely, very nice. But now I have to go to my machine, find the configuration, and edit. I don't know about Sol, to be honest, to comment on this.
Yeah. Okay, I will come to that. Phoenix, want to add to that?
No, sorry. I have 3 other questions. I don't know, Yanis, were we done here or am I
Okay,
interrupting?
then let me add one point here. So Yanis, in general, I think if you're doing Ansible or Salt, they serve the same purpose. Okay, so I would say in general, what you can do with one, you can also do with the other. That's no difference. And regarding configuring something like an ARM server, I would say maybe I don't really understand you, and I can explain that what we have here is, for example, this is ARM specific, but I would say this is a workaround. It's not like something that should be there. I would like it to be easier to say, at this level, I don't care about ARM. And also for the OpenQA package, I don't want to care about the architecture. I don't want to care if it's an Intel machine or an ARM machine or x86, 64, whatever, because I mean that's also the promise of the Linux distribution or SUSE products, is that at this level you don't need to. Do you want to install openQA work on ARM machine? Well, just do it. Do it in the very same way as on x86, 64. That's the point. But we can also discuss this later if you like. Now I would like to come to your points, Phoenix. 3 questions you said. Start with one.
Related. Yeah. The first one is the openQA auto update service safe to execute also when jobs are still running on the instance?
Safe in the way of not having any inconsistent job results? Yes, for sure. So will the auto update eventually interrupt jobs? Yes, because it also triggers a reboot, and at the latest at this point it will interrupt jobs. I think by default, if I'm not mistaken, they should work in a way that they finish each job and only restart after that. But the reboot doesn't wait for the jobs finish. But as I said, they should be re-triggered automatically.
Okay. So in principle, it should be fine. And the worst thing that happens is that openQA automatically re-triggers the job that it kills beforehand.
Yeah, I would say in a worst job, you are losing some hours of testing if you have an hourly long running test job. Yeah. But I'm telling everybody in the SUSE QE Tools team, be brave. Don't be afraid to update the machine or reboot machine, or as we say, if it hurts, do it more often until we find a way to make it as smooth as possible. And I think we found a really good way, because in the past years nobody complained like, hey, you rebooted the machine and jobs were running and now I need to restart everything, because this is all handled automatically.
Yeah, but I mean, the main reason why I'm not doing this on my instance is that often overnight jobs are kind of necessary. I was afraid that if the machine just reboots itself, then I lose the state of all of them. A restart of the job is absolutely acceptable. So if this is a solution, and this is actually really nice.
Yep. So my suggestion to you is, if you are afraid of reboots, well, you need to reboot more often to become less afraid and learn about any problems. And if you see problems in, you're like, OpenQA doesn't behave properly because when you reboot something breaks, tell us. We will help.
There is another philosophy to it. If you look close enough, you will find issues, and then someone is going to poke to you at fixing those issues. So sometimes not looking too closely is also a very efficient way of getting the job done that you have to actually do.
Okay, right. So to let me specify you, if you bring up issues, we will try to understand each and every issue. We will not fix all the issues because we need to prioritize.
No worries, but the restart strategy is really nice. That is good.
Okay.
Second question: what is the strategy to keep the OS Auto ins distri OpenSUSE up to date?
Right. I mean, so that's a good point. OS Auto ins distri OpenSUSE is mostly just code that we can refresh from Git. So that had been in place for years already, way before continuous update of the backend, that there's just a cron job that runs every minute and fetches the test code via Git. Okay, the fetch needle script, which is also part of OpenQA. So, where is it? Fetch needles. This is what is called. And what this does is, well, it calls Git update. So it's fetching, it's trying to repair something if there are uncommitted changes, because, over the Needle Web UI editor, people might save needles during that process, but basically this is what it does. But OS Auto ins distri OpenSUSE has dependencies. And it has dependencies which, well, because this is like an OpenSUSE project, what you have there is a spec file building an RPM package, and it says begin auto-generated dependency list. But you might come to the idea like, hey, there's this super cool package which helps me to build my test modules better, and I would like to use that dependency. You bring in this change, and you bring in the code that is relying on that. Then there's a slight chance where stuff might break because the package, as soon as the spec file changes, this triggers a rebuild of the package in Devil openQA, which is OS Audience Registry OpenSUSE depps. So you see here, trigger service run 1 hour ago. This is retriggering, and the package doesn't really contain anything but the dependency dated in the metadata. So it's like a tiny package, but still it needs to be installed and deployed so that it does pull in any of these new dependencies. So in reality, it doesn't really matter because, you know, let's assume you have this pull request, brings in new dependency and uses new dependency in tests. You will have it merged, and until you see it some minutes later, both the Git code will have been updated and the continuous update will have the dependency package installed automatically. But there might be a chance where this is delayed, like right now even, but now would be a time where you could potentially hit that if you bring in new dependencies and immediately use them. Okay?
Yeah.
How would one make that theoretically consistent? Well, there are one of two ways. Either you say we handle dependencies the same way as we handle the code in Git, meaning that every time you run the tests, you try to make sure that the dependencies are passed, like maybe not from the spec file, but from cpan file. Sure, you could do that, like call cpan on the worker, maybe in a container. Then it would be consistent. Or you say you deploy the test as well as part of a package. So you don't deploy the packages over Git, but you build not only the dependencies, but the test code itself as part of the package. Then it would also be consistent.
Okay.
Third question?
No, a last one. Olli, do you have a good way of restarting OpenQA as a whole? Just because you showed it, there are many services around there, and if you make, for instance, a change in etc openqa, openqa.ini, many sub-services might be affected by the change. How could you restart the whole openQA instance or the whole openQA installation without doing a reboot?
Okay, that's easy. Restart OpenQA web UI. There you are.
The web is the master or the parent.
So what did this do? Let's check. Did it restart the scheduler? And you can see it did not. So the scheduler was not affected. Did it restart the WebSocket server? No, it did not. Why? Because, well, the WebSocket server doesn't really have any configuration. But did it affect the brew service? No, it also did not. Why? Because what we do there is we run minion jobs, and they would pick up any new configuration within. But it did restart the web UI now. Yeah, that's UTC.
How do you also restart the other ones?
Well, okay. I mean, you can just do.
Yeah, okay. This is, yes. But this requires knowledge about all the parent components that you need to do. Is there one single unit that you can restart in order to say openQA to just restart all? Including
yes, it's called reboot.
Okay.
That would be consistent because, you know, maybe you're making changes to the Postgres config, and you would need to know and understand the system and say, okay, maybe I need to change that, and then do I need to call restart on PostgreSQL? Well, actually, in that case, you don't. You can tell Postgres to reload. So, you know, you would need to have that very specific knowledge about all the individual services. It really very much depends. So this is why I would say don't be another reason to don't be afraid of reboots, and yeah, do that. I haven't tried it for long, but it might be faster and quicker by now to use kexec, so that you don't actually reboot a complete machine, but just tell the kernel to re-init the complete system from scratch. Here on O3 it doesn't really matter, because as a VM it really reboots quickly. On physical machines it does matter, especially if you're talking about enterprise hardware, when it can take 5 minutes to reinitialize firmware and such.
Nice, thank you.
Okay. Well, with that, we reached the end of the time already. Thank you all for your interest in that topic. As I said, this is what I presented here is nothing special, but really should be something that you can use on your site as well. So you can just install openQA auto update or openQA continuous update, and it even helps you to update all the other system packages on your computer as well. And that concludes the topic. For the next week, we will have Ina presenting us email notifications about unreviewed job results. It's a feature which we had now for some time as well. You might have tried it out already. You might have seen the effect of that. You might have read mailing list posts, but we wanted to discuss that in the workshop session as well. And you're very welcome. Write your feedback there, your questions or suggestions. Until then, see you and bye.